Set in a lush valley with a beautiful trail leading to it, Font-de-Gaume is one of the very few painted caves that people are allowed to actually visit. A very rewarding experience. We're at Font-de-Gaume, which is one of the most remarkable of the painted prehistoric caves in the Dordogne Valley area. It's one of the great landmarks of prehistoric art because there are paintings on the walls inside these caves that date back 15,000 years. They're mostly paintings of bisons and some reindeer and some horses, and it really gives you an idea of the level of development that mankind had already reached 15,000 years ago. It's some of the first painted art ever found in the world. Of course, there are painted caves scattered throughout Europe. You find them in Spain and particularly through the south of France. But this region here is the most famous for a concentration of painted caves. They were using the contours of the caves in part to shape their paintings. So you see some very naturalistic looking, almost three-dimensional bison painted onto the rock wall where there'd be a natural protrusion for the head and a natural protrusion for the body. And it really shows how talented these early humans were. They were hunters and gatherers, and of course these paintings were all about the hunt because the bison was one of their main foods and the reindeer another one of their main foods. So the theory is that this was a way of guaranteeing a good hunt. It was their homage to the bison, perhaps tied up in their early religion as well. Although very little is actually known since it was 15,000 years ago and there's no written records. Sometimes you'll be reading a guidebook and some obscure little reference catches your eye, such as mention of the hamlet of Orville. Well, it sounded like a good idea, so we drove over to take a look, and here it is. There's only about 10 buildings clustered here, but it is quite charming, especially with the little duck pond and swans gliding through it. A cluster of homes. There's even a little post office here. The hamlet of Orville, just a little detour and another side trip. Took about 20 minutes to get there. It was worth it. Then we continue on to one of the major towns of the area, Belves, famous as the site of 7 towers, medieval towers that date back. And there's a main street that's for pedestrians as usual. And in this case, it's early December and nobody's home. The town was really quite empty. The town square has a 15th century covered market and several of the noted towers. There are really charming buildings in Belves. It's set on a hilltop from which you can have some commanding views across the countryside, and there are a few of these pedestrian lanes that emanate out from that central square, including a narrow alley that leads you to the Archbishop's Palace, indicating that this really was a fairly important town back in its day. There are a number of towns that were specifically built as fortifications in the Middle Ages. They were called bastides, and one of the most famous is the town of Dome. We're heading there. It's a drive that takes about an hour from anywhere because it's up on a hill. It's an isolated little fortified town, but it's worth the visit. There's a wall around it and several gates you drive right in. And the town itself is a relic of the Middle Ages. It was first founded in the year 1293 and built up over the centuries. It played a role in the 100 Years' War. It changed back and forth from the British hands to the French hands and to the British and back to the French. Here's the main street, the Grand Rue. There's shops here. There's people still living in the town. There's lots of school kids out in the daytime as well. It's not just an empty relic anymore by any means. This is a real major tourist attraction in the Périgord region. It attracted some artists in its day. The writer Henry Miller loved the place. There are some fine views from the hilltop and a little park with a bench. You can sit down and rest up and then continue on your way out through that same wall, through another gate, continuing on your journey. We're heading to the town of Rocamador, passing some walnut orchards. These are one of the great food crops of the area. Rocamador is an amazing little village, as you'll soon find out. It was originally a pilgrimage village from the Middle Ages, and it's clinging to a limestone cliff overlooking this vast valley. It's still a pilgrimage village today, although we were visiting in the off-season and you'll see it was rather empty. It's a spectacular setting. You've got 3 levels, the chateau on the top, the sanctuary in the middle, and the village down below. And you can drive right to it, especially here in the off-season, no problem with parking. And we found that the town was pretty empty. This is a weekday, and yet most of the shops were closed, hotels were closed, restaurants were closed, the shutters were drawn, but there is the chateau magnificently perched above the village. It's a walled village. In medieval times, it was actually fortified, keep the enemies away. Now it's very peaceful, of course, very tranquil and quiet. They say that in the Middle Ages, on a busy day, there'd be as many as 30,000 pilgrims. The cheese shop was one of the few places open, and so we stopped for a bite and a taste.
And this is a blue goat cheese, and this is a blue sheep cheese, which is one of my favorites. You want to taste?
Yeah.
Very tasty.
Okay.
And this is a Cantal. It's a cow cheese.
And this town is very quiet today, huh?
Yeah, but it's not the season.
The tourist information office was closed, but the cheese lady was very friendly and filled us in on some of the history, which dates back to the 12th century. This is the staircase that pilgrims would climb and still do today on their knees for special blessings.
I advise you go down. This is what you have to see here. By walking, you go here, you visit everything, and you go down. You can see the sanctuary from here, and it's very, very beautiful to see. The Rocamador is 3 floors, okay? You're here, this is a city where you are, and normally you come here, you go to the stairs, and this is what you have to do on your knees. Visit the sanctuary on your knees too, and go to the castle. Normally you have to do the pilgrim way, on your knees, and so you will be forgiven for all the eternity. You have to do it on your knees, normally. This is a rule, so you have to go there.
There's the sanctuary at the mid-level, and you can walk up to it through the staircase or take the funicular. Well, we weren't about to spend a few hours doing the climbing, and so instead we got back in the car and we're on our way, continuing along to the next destination in our adventures through the Dordogne Valley.